Modernism in my neighborhood. Modern buildings embedded in their communities. Episode 1.
Hi, I'm Donna Robertson. I live in the Gold Coast at the corner of Astor and Goethe Streets. Amid rows of historic townhouses and leafy sidewalks stands one of Chicago's quiet modern icons, Astor Tower. Designed by Bertrand Goldberg in 1963, this slender, concrete and glass column feels both futuristic and neighborly, a modern counterpoint to the city's Gold Coast elegance. Goldberg envisioned it as more than a building. It was a vertical community. The tower's clean grid and rounded corners carry his hallmark blend of engineering innovation and human scale. Inside, the top of the tower restaurant crowned the building with panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the skyline. It became a social anchor for the neighborhood, open to residents and visitors alike as a residential hotel initially. In 1965, the Beatles stayed here, adding a note of pop culture fame to its architectural story. What's remarkable about Astor Tower is how it bridges worlds, historic and modern, local and international. It proves that modernism, when designed with care and civic spirit, can both stand out and belong. For me, it's a reminder that architecture's best moments happen not in isolation, but in dialogue with the street, the city, and the people who inhabit it. In a neighborhood that celebrates the past, this building represents optimism about the future, a reminder that modern architecture isn't always about contrast, but conversation. It's a piece of the city's evolving story, standing here at the intersection of history and invention.
Modernism in my neighborhood. West Rogers Park and Peterson Park is one of the most ethnically diverse places in the city for both food and culture. Growing rapidly during World War II, Jewish families moved here from the west sides of town, and congregations and schools followed, commissioning buildings that interestingly reflect both modern ideals and enduring traditions. Along California, Toohey, and Devon Avenues, the story of modernism here is not about glass towers or monumental gestures, but about community architecture built to serve, teach, and gather. Multifunctional places such as the Mestiva of Chicago have layers that reveal decades of adaptation and repair, a sign of possible further transition. However, we can see structures that have more long-lasting prospects. At Toohey Avenue, the Yeshiva Shiras Yisrael at 2620 Toohey Avenue was originally the New Israel Congregational Synagogue, built in 1955. Over the years, it was changed through other congregations, such as the Hebrew Theological College, which now owns it as its Bilstein Institute. It keeps a modest mid-century vocabulary, formed like a monument and an urban marquee. Originally clad with stained glass, its infilled facade and pragmatic geometry mirror the neighborhood's quiet urbanity. A few blocks east, Yeshivas Meor HaTorah, once Kilath Jacob Beth Samuel, and before that Beth Israel AG, carried its lineage in materials and urban features. Limestone panels, textured brick, terraces, stairs, and glass volumes mark a procession of neighborhood passage. And finally, at California and Pratt, the Bernard Horowitz Jewish Community Center, completed in 1961, remains one of the area's most intact and well-utilized modern buildings. It's both civic and inviting, an architecture of openness and belonging. Together, these buildings tell a story of continuity and reinvention. Modernism in West Rogers Park wasn't about spectacle, it was about everyday faith, education, and community, a modernism that endures through use.
Modernism in my neighborhood. So I'm standing out in front of Nutcher West High School, which was designed by Perkins and Will and built in 1962 though it's not in my neighborhood, it is a place that used to be my neighborhood. So I grew up here in Northfield. And it was a hugely impactful place on me. It's a fantastic building. I think it's underappreciated. It's like a mini campus, a really incredible high school, and it's still in pretty good shape. When I went to New Trier West over 50 years ago, I was introduced to photography and, in a way, architecture. Photography was very direct, and I loved the class, and I loved taking pictures, which has lasted my whole life. And architecture was a little more in the background, but nonetheless very influential because I loved taking pictures of buildings. And in serendipitously happening upon New Trier again a weekend ago, things clicked for me, and that's why I wanted to share New Trier West as an influential, beautiful modern place that I hope you all will go and see on your own.
Modernism in my neighborhood. Hi, I'm Marcy Dinius, and I'm a Docomomo Chicago board member, and I'd like to take you on a virtual walk from my former neighborhood of Kenwood on Chicago's Mid-South Side down to neighboring Hyde Park. We'll start at the corner of 48th and Woodlawn Avenue, where you'll notice on the northeast and northwest corners sets of modernist townhomes that stand in notable contrast to their neighboring Gothic and Tudor Revival mansions. The townhomes on the northeast corner were designed by Keck and Keck, and on the northwest, behind a 6-foot wall of buff brick laid in a pattern that you might recognize from Mies van der Rohe's Illinois Institute of Technology campus, you'll see the all-glass second floors of 8 townhomes peeking up over the somewhat imposing wall. These were designed by Mies's former draftsman Y.C. Wong and built in 1963. Come in through the front gate and you'll discover that the entire facade is glass. Wong called these his garden townhomes and designed them so that the garden would be at eye level from seating in the living room. His design was recognized in a 1963 feature in prestigious Arts and Architecture magazine. The previous owner of my former townhome in the row was an avid gardener, as I was delighted to discover come spring, when countless daffodils, tulips, lilies, and peonies sprouted up and created an absolutely stunning show. From here, we'll walk down Woodlawn, pausing to admire the Gidwitz House, finished in 1947 and designed by Ralph Rapson with John Vandermeulen. This is one of my favorite modernist houses on the planet, and I was stunned to learn recently that it was a remodel of a Victorian mansion like its neighbors. This handsome white stucco rectangular box, stacked and cantilevered over a smaller stone-faced rectangular box, takes my breath away every time I see it. And though there are plenty of other modernist buildings to appreciate along the way, we'll hurry to the former Lutheran School of Theology at the corner of 55th and University. I'm not sure I can quite explain why, but I'm powerfully moved by this set of 3 buildings, designed by Perkins and Will and completed in 1968. The long building facing 55th Street is massy and dark, with irregularly divided windows on its second and third floors. Yet this mass seems to float above its set-back, glass-walled first floor, supported by substantial yet graceful cruciform concrete pillars. I'm worried about the campus's future, though. The Lutheran school moved out, and the University of Chicago now owns the campus, and its future is uncertain. That it might face demolition is in keeping with the complicated history of these neighborhoods. All of the modernism in Kenwood and Hyde Park came as a result of so-called slum clearance. Many of the mansions had been converted into boarding houses that were poorly maintained by landlords. This is true of the sites that the Keck and Wong townhomes and the Lutheran school were built on. Still, those rundown old buildings were home to many people who had real communities there. Some were moved into modernist public housing that was no better maintained. Given, then, the high social cost of the buildings I've shared here, I hope we'll work hard to preserve them, both for their architectural significance and as implicit memorials to the people and communities they displaced.
Modernism in my neighborhood. After World War II, 12 million service members returned to civilian life. Armed with the GI Bill of Rights and a VA mortgage, most settled into the new suburbs that had been carved out of former farmland to begin what would become known as the baby boom. While past generations were instructed that children should be seen and not heard, or that to spare the rod was to spoil the child, post-war parents were more inclined to indulge their children. With the rise of consumerism, television advertising found an entirely new audience. Children who could cajole their parents into buying them things they saw advertised while watching their Saturday morning cartoons. This new ethos translated into the physical environment as well. In 1955, Walt Disney opened Disneyland in Anaheim, California, a veritable magic kingdom geared totally toward children. Closer to home, Chicagoland created some of its own memorable icons. One of those was the Par King Skill Golf Course, more commonly known as miniature golf. Opened in 1960 and located in Morton Grove at the corner of Dempster and Waukegan Road, Par King was advertised as the most elaborate 18-hole mini golf course in the nation. Each hole was unique and included such landmarks as the Liberty Bell, Mount Rushmore, and a giant shoe from the fairy tale The Old Woman in the Shoe. However, its most memorable hole was the scale model of the Prudential Building, the tallest building in Chicago at the time. Golfers had the opportunity to hit their ball into an actual Prudential elevator and watch it rise and then be unceremoniously dumped back onto the green. Today, unfortunately, a strip mall with a Starbucks occupies Par King's former site. Another mid-century landmark is Superdog. Dining at Superdog is like stepping back in time. Opened in 1948 at the intersection of Milwaukee, Nagle, and Devon, its founders, Maury and Florrie Berman, were ahead of their time and inadvertently created what would one day become known as kitsch architecture. The drive-in is distinguished by its two gigantic 12-foot-tall his and her hot dogs. In-car dining was reflective of the burgeoning car culture where one ordered their meal by speaking into a chromium steel microphone. Superdog remains in the same location today with virtually the same menu. Although largely indistinguishable today from its award-winning architecture, Old Orchard Shopping Mall in Skokie still retains its basic concept, despite its controversial 1994 remodeling. Completed in 1956, Old Orchard was one of the first regional malls in the country. Developed by Philip Klutznick and designed by Lobel, Schlossman, and Bennett, its numerous open-air rooms afforded plenty of opportunities to entertain the kids. Its outdoor areas included trees, fountains, bridges over stocked fish ponds, and generous flower beds. Rather than dread when told they were going shopping with Mom, kids were excited to accompany their parents to Old Orchard to play in these delightful, kid-friendly areas.